Canadians hardest hit by the recession. But at the same time, our plan is focused on the long term, focused on positioning Canada for unprecedented future success.
Take him away!
Mr. Harper and Mr. Prentice, you are hereby under arrest on suspicion of criminal negligence. You do not have the right to remain silent on this issue, as the lives of millions of people are at stake.
Lock him up!
Throw the key away.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the court. We are here today to hear the case of the people versus Harper and Prentice. The defendants, Jim Prentice and Stephen Harper, stand accused of criminal negligence as defined under the Canadian Criminal Code, section 222 bracket 5 bracket B. First, we will hear from the prosecution on this matter. Prosecution, please step forward.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, we are here today after a week in which Canadian citizens have occupied MP's offices to draw attention to their frustration and to their concern with political inactivity by the Harper government on the subject of climate change. As well, there's an international coalition is calling forward for Canada to be suspended from the Commonwealth on their poor record of climate change. We believe that this is happening because the Harper government defends a position that is destroying critical ecosystems, as well as causing the death of millions of people and displacing them. Therefore, the prosecution demands that the government set legally binding targets to cut greenhouse gas emissions by at least 25% from 1990 levels. Gentlemen, 1990, that is. By 2020. By 2020, as well as help to work towards an ambitious and fair and binding agreement in Copenhagen. The prosecution would now like to call to the stand our expert witness, UBC professor Bill Rees. He is the creator of the ecological footprint concept. His work has inspired millions of people and also changed their whole opinion on the way they look at their impact on the environment. Ladies and gentlemen, it's my pleasure to introduce to you Professor Bill Rees.
Thank you all for being here. Can you hear me? Is this loud enough? I think the argument is really quite simple. Despite all you've been hearing recently from highly paid climate change deniers, climate change is a fact. Temperatures have risen by 0.8 degrees in the last century. They're currently rising at an accelerating rate of 0.2 degrees per decade. We're seeing sea level rise at about 5 times the rate predicted by global models. We're seeing the destruction of the glaciers. We're seeing the spread of deserts around the world as the westerly winds recede toward the poles as a result of the larger heat budget of the planet, and so on. There's no question that climate change is a reality. It is currently affecting the lives and properties of tens of thousands of people, some say hundreds of thousands of people annually. Secondly, it's absolutely true that humans have a very modest effect on climate. By far the largest impact comes from winds, waves, and the sun. But the human marginal impact is exceedingly important. Your body temperatures are 37 degrees. That's about well over 280 degrees above absolute zero. But a 2-degree shift will kill you. If you run a fever of 39 degrees for a significant period of time, you are dead. The fact is that a marginal change in the global climate will move climate belts by several hundred kilometers. We're now talking about a potential temperature increase of 4 to 6 degrees on the current path. That will shift climate belts so much as to destroy much of the agricultural productivity of Earth, spread deserts, and so on. So there's now clear evidence of climate change, and we know the causal linkage. Of all the factors that are responsible for determining the Earth's climate, none is capable of explaining the change that we are observing other than the increase in greenhouse gases. And human beings are responsible for the majority of the increase in greenhouse gases in the last century. Climate change is a fact. There's a 90% chance, according to the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, that human activities are responsible for that change, and we know that it is already affecting the lives and property of tens, if not hundreds of thousands of people per year. Now, the point is that those countries that have already industrialized have the largest ecological footprints and the greatest debt to humanity and to the planet. Canada and the United States, for example, emit upwards of 20 tons of carbon dioxide per capita per annum. And while it is true that India and China and other developing countries are increasing their CO2 emissions, we are still 4 to 5 times as much 4 to 5 times as great emitters on a per capita basis as even industrializing China. So the real responsibility for climate change to date resides with countries like Canada and the United States. Now, to the effect that it's a fact that it's causing damage and that we are in denial about our role in this, we are guilty of negligence, certainly moral negligence against the people of this planet and against ecosystems. I want to read directly a comment, or at least a phrase or two, from the Criminal Code of Canada, which makes perfectly clear that the lack of intent to do harm is no excuse, and whether the harm is done directly or indirectly is no excuse. And it says, quote, "Everyone is criminally negligent who, in doing anything, or in omitting to do anything that it is our duty to do, shows wanton or reckless disregard for the lives or safety of other persons." Significantly, the code goes on to state, quote, "that a person commits homicide when, directly or indirectly, by any means, he causes the death of a human being by being negligent." Now, what I'm arguing here is not that there's an international framework of law under which Canadians could be held negligent, but we claim to be citizens of a global village in which all persons should be treated equally. And there's no prima facie moral or legal argument to suggest that we should have a higher standard of care or obligation to international citizens than to citizens within our own country. So the basic argument here is that by failing to act, by failing to recognize our responsibility for the damage being done to the lives and safety of other persons, we are certainly morally negligent. And if we were actually acting as if this were a global village with the appropriate basis in law, we would be regarded as acting criminally negligent toward other human beings and towards the ecosystems that sustain us all. I rest my case.
Thank you, the prosecution. Defendants, do you have anything to say in your defense?
I've come to realize my position cannot be defended.
So, on the matter of the people versus James Prentice and Stephen Harper, how do you, the jury, find the defendants?
Guilty!
Guilty!
As charged.
So, the defendants are hereby found guilty and released on probation on the following term: that you travel to Copenhagen and cooperate with the international community in crafting a fair, ambitious, and binding agreement to significantly reduce global greenhouse emissions. It is found You both